We've touched on image hose nozzles briefly at a few points in this course, but now it's time to explore them in more detail. And I'll open my custom image hose nozzles palette drawer. You can also find the nozzles in the window menu under media panels. Instead of paint, image hose nozzle brushes deposit stamps on the canvas. You can create custom full color stamps to make brushes that cannot be replicated by the other brush engines in Painter. Image hose nozzles can be really time saving because they allow you to quickly generate repeating elements in your scene. For instance, if you're painting a tree, rather than painting 1,000 individual leaves, why not paint a dozen leaves and then make a nozzle out of them? Then anytime you want to paint leaves in your style, you can do that more efficiently. To understand how an image hose works, we first need to make a distinction between an image hose brush and an image hose nozzle. An image hose nozzle is the medium that's going to come out of an image hose brush. It's essentially a stamp brush or a full color dab that can be composed of one or more unique images. To give you an analogy, if an image hose is a garden hose, then the nozzle is the water that comes out of the hose. The image hose brush determines how the water comes out of the hose, sort of like one of those fancy attachments with spray and jet modes. I'll let Corel Painter know that I want to paint with an image hose nozzle by selecting an image hose brush. If my custom image hose AR palette is missing, you can find it in the window menu under Custom Palette, or you can find it in the brush selector. There's a whole default category of image hose brushes, but we'll be using the ones in my palette drawer. You can see on the icon that linear size P will spray out a stream of stamps in a linear fashion, and you can control the size with pressure. So P stands for pressure in the name of the brush. Let's try that out on the canvas with the clouds nozzle. I'll paint a horizontal stroke, and you can see that this combination of brush and nozzle sprays out cloud fragments that overlap to create a long cloud. If I just click with my mouse, then you can see each of those individual cloud-shaped stamps. I can create individual clouds like this, or I can paint overlapping strokes to build up clouds that are more complex. If I use light pressure, I will get very small clouds. If I use heavier pressure, then I'll get bigger clouds. You may notice that with very light pressure, some of the stamps get distorted, so there is a limit to the minimum size that you would want to use for nozzles. Just as well, if you make a brush that exceeds the original size of the nozzle element, the stamp will become a little bit blurry. This nozzle will work no matter what you do, because clouds are fractal by nature. However, other types of repeating objects may need to be deposited using a different technique to look correct. For example, let's try the boulders nozzle. I can paint individual boulders like this, or I can build up a rock formation. Notice if you paint upward, the boulders look like they're in shadow. If you paint downward, they look like they're in the light. I can leverage this to make something that looks like an arch. Generally speaking, it's best to paint these stamps from background to foreground so that the objects layer correctly. I'll paint overlapping boulders that start from the background and move into the foreground, and now the objects are in the correct perspective. Instead of a stream, I can spray the stamps out as well using the Spray Size P Angle R brush. Now, rather than a line of boulders, I'm getting a spray. If I make my brush smaller, I can create little rocks on the ground. Just as well, I could change this to Linear Size P Angle D. This creates a stream of boulders, but the angle is changing with the direction of my brush. The angle isn't very obvious with this nozzle, so I will select branches. Now if I paint tapered strokes with this brush, you can see that I can create a tree branch. If I just click with my mouse, you can see that all this is doing is creating a stream of individual branch segments. In regards to selecting the correct image hose brush for each nozzle, the icons provide suggestions. Branches recommends Linear Size P Angle D, because otherwise the effect doesn't work, but other nozzles may work with a variety of image hose brushes. There are lots of ways to control the nozzles that come out of your brush by utilizing expressions. That's really all the image hose brushes are doing. I'll return to Spray Size P Angle R, and let's look in the angle panel for the expression. Right now it's set to random, so if I paint with this brush, the expression is going to change the angle of the stamps. Let's change the expression to bearing. Now, changing the angle of my pen modifies the angle of the stamps that are spraying out. As we saw earlier, some of my nozzles are in grayscale. These are special nozzles that can be tinted any color you like. Back up at the top, I'll select the Leaf Clumps nozzle in the Nature library. This nozzle recommends that we use Linear Size P color. Anytime an Image's brush says color, you'll know that it will be able to tint the nozzles. If you look closely at the brush icon, the black and white dots represent the main and additional color swatches. I'll click on my additional color and choose green. Now when I paint, I get green leaves. You can control the amount of tinting using the additional color property. A lower value produces a stronger tint, while a higher value creates less tinting. I find that around 15% works best. If I want red leaves, I'll select my additional color and choose red. Another way to tint Image's nozzles is to paint with a non-color Image's brush on a default layer, and then use a separate layer set to multiply to tint it. You can keep the tinting confined to the shape of the nozzle by using the select layer content trick. I'll use my custom digital airbrush and activate the main color to tint the leaves brown. And now that tinting is on a separate layer. Not only does it do a better job of colorizing the nozzle, but I can also add multiple colors, adjust the layer opacity, and change the composite method to create a different blend.